in the vast expanse of the Galactic Confederation, where 1,000 species trade, fight, and form alliances among the stars. Humans are known for one thing above all else: their unpredictability. While other races follow ancient codes of honor, rigid hierarchies, and time-tested traditions, humans seem to dance to a rhythm only they can hear. But what happens when a human chooses silence over their species' notorious tendency to charge headfirst into danger? What secrets lie behind eyes that have seen too much? And what terrible power might be unleashed when that silence is finally broken? Commander Zarathik of the Veltar Imperial Navy thought she knew everything about her quiet human husband. She was wrong. Dead wrong. And the entire galaxy is about to discover why humans earned their reputation as the most dangerous species in known space, not despite their unpredictability, but because of what happens when they finally decide to stop holding back. Some warriors are born with fire in their hearts. Others forge that fire through loss, pain, and the weight of impossible choices. But the most dangerous warriors of all? They're the ones who've learned to keep that fire banked and cold, waiting for the moment when the galaxy needs to burn. This is the story of Marcus Chen, a human who spoke little and smiled less. His wife thought his silence was weakness. His enemies thought his restraint was fear. They were all about to learn the truth about what happens when a sleeping dragon finally opens its eyes. Commander Zarathik pressed her scaled fingertips against the cool surface of the observation deck's viewport, watching the swirling nebula beyond paint the darkness in shades of purple and gold. The Veltar's Pride, her heavy cruiser, cut through space with the silent grace of a predator, its engines humming with barely contained power. She should have felt pride at commanding such a vessel, satisfaction at leading one of the Confederation's most elite crews. Instead, she felt only the familiar weight of disappointment settling in her chest. Behind her, she could hear the soft footsteps of her husband as he moved through their shared quarters. Marcus Chen, human, age 34 standard years, occupation listed as cultural liaison and diplomatic attaché. The man she had married in a ceremony that had shocked both their species, bound together by what she had believed was love and mutual respect. Now, 3 years into their marriage, she wondered if she had made the greatest mistake of her life. The Veltar were warriors by nature and tradition. Their society valued strength, decisive action, and the willingness to face danger head-on. For over 2,000 years, they had built their reputation on these qualities, becoming one of the most respected military forces in the Galactic Confederation. When Zarathik had achieved the rank of commander at the unprecedented age of 28 cycles, she had done so by embodying everything her people stood for. She was fierce in battle, quick to make difficult decisions, and never backed down from a challenge. Her marriage to a human had been controversial enough. Humans were known throughout the galaxy as a species of contradictions, sometimes brave to the point of insanity, other times surprisingly cautious. They could be brilliant tacticians or reckless berserkers, often in the same battle. But Marcus seemed to embody none of the qualities that made humans fascinating to other species. He was quiet where humans were typically boisterous, cautious where they were bold, peaceful where they were aggressive. "The evening briefing starts in 10 minutes, Marcus said softly from behind her, his voice carrying that same gentle tone that had once seemed endearing but now felt like a constant reminder of his passivity. Zarathik didn't turn around. "I'm aware of the schedule, Marcus. I am the ship's commander." There was a pause, and she could almost feel him choosing his words carefully. It was something he always did, this measured consideration of every syllable. While other humans she had met seemed to speak their thoughts as soon as they formed, Marcus treated language like a precision instrument, using only what was necessary and nothing more. "Of course, Commander. I only thought you might want to review the cultural notes I prepared about the Jeklon delegation we'll be meeting tomorrow." Finally, she turned to face him. Marcus stood near their small dining table, his dark hair neat as always, his uniform precisely fitted and without a single wrinkle. He was handsome in the way humans often were, with strong features and expressive brown eyes that seemed to hold depths she could never quite fathom. At first, those depths had intrigued her. Now they frustrated her beyond measure. "Cultural notes," she repeated, her voice flat. "For a species that has been part of the Confederation for over a century, I think I can manage a simple diplomatic meeting without a tutorial." Something flickered across Marcus's face. Hurt, perhaps, or disappointment, but it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it, replaced by the same calm, patient expression he always wore. "Of course, Sarah, I simply thought, that's the problem, isn't it?" The words came out harsher than she intended, but 3 years of frustration had built to a breaking point. You think, you analyze. You prepare cultural notes and diplomatic protocols, and 47 different contingency plans for every possible situation. But you never act. Marcus set down the datapad he had been holding, his movements careful and controlled. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean. Don't you?" Zarathique moved toward him, her tail lashing behind her in a display of agitation that any Veltar would recognize as a warning sign. 3 years ago, when the Corvan pirates attacked that civilian transport, every other officer on the bridge was ready to pursue them. Do you remember what you did? I recommended we secure the transport survivors first, and you hesitated. You wanted to run scans, check their weapons capabilities, review their tactical formations. While you were thinking, 12 civilians died because those pirates had time to destroy their life pods. Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The survivors we rescued numbered 43. If we had pursued immediately without securing them, the transport's reactor would have breached, and all of them would have died. And if you had acted with the decisiveness expected of a warrior, we could have saved everyone and eliminated a pirate threat that continues to plague shipping lanes today. The words hung between them like a blade. Marcus studied her face for a long moment, and she thought she saw something shift in his expression, a hardness that reminded her, oddly, of veterans she had known who had seen too much combat. "You think I'm a coward?" It wasn't a question, and the flat way he said it made something twist uncomfortably in her chest. But she had come too far to back down now. "I think you're afraid to make the difficult choices that command requires. I think you've been content to hide behind protocols and procedures while others take the risks and make the sacrifices necessary to keep this ship and this crew safe." Marcus nodded slowly, as if her words confirmed something he had long suspected. "And what would you have me do? Challenge you for command? Demand a transfer to a combat position? Start fights in the mess hall to prove my warrior spirit? I would have you be the man I thought I was marrying." The words exploded from her before she could stop them, carrying 3 years of accumulated disappointment and frustration. "When we met, you were introduced as a human. Your people are known across the galaxy as warriors without fear, beings who charge into battle against impossible odds and somehow emerge victorious. They're the species that single-handedly held off the Zarian invasion at the Battle of New Geneva, that turned a losing war into a stalemate through pure audacity and refusal to surrender. They're the ones who look at a problem everyone else considers unsolvable and somehow find a way through." She gestured toward him, her voice rising. "But you're nothing like them. You spend your days cataloging cultural differences and writing diplomatic reports. You defer to authority, avoid confrontation, and seem perfectly content to let others make the important decisions while you fade into the background. You're not the human I thought I was getting. You're not even trying to be human." The silence that followed was profound. Marcus stood perfectly still, his face unreadable, and for a moment Zarathique felt a flash of uncertainty. There had been something in his eyes when she mentioned the Battle of New Geneva, a flicker of recognition that seemed oddly personal. "You're right," he said finally, his voice so quiet she had to strain to hear it. "I'm not trying to be human. I'm trying very hard not to be." Before she could ask what he meant by that, her communicator chimed with an urgent message. She glanced at the display and felt her blood chill. "Red alert! All senior staff to the bridge immediately." We have incoming hostiles! As alarms began wailing throughout the ship, Marcus moved to the weapon locker and retrieved her sidearm, offering it to her with the same calm efficiency he brought to everything else. But as their fingers brushed during the exchange, she felt something she had never noticed before. His hands were rock steady, without even the slightest tremor of fear or excitement that she would have expected from anyone, human or otherwise, facing their first combat situation in months. "Marcus?" she began, but he was already moving toward the door. "Your crew needs you on the bridge, Commander. We can finish this conversation later." As they ran through corridors filled with rushing personnel preparing for battle, Zarathique found herself stealing glances at her husband. There was something different about the way he moved now, a fluid economy of motion that spoke of training she had never known he possessed. When a young ensign stumbled in front of them, Marcus caught the man's arm and steadied him with a strength that seemed at odds with his slender frame. The bridge was controlled chaos when they arrived. Lieutenant Commander Vexstar, her second-in-command, turned from the tactical display with his crest fully extended in agitation. "Commander, we have 12 ships approaching at high speed. Configuration matches known Corvan raider vessels, but they're moving in formation. This isn't a typical pirate attack." Zarathique took her position in the command chair, her personal concerns forgotten in the face of immediate danger. Shields up, weapons hot. "Have they responded to our hail?" "Negative, Commander. They're maintaining communication silence, and their approach vector suggests they intend to engage." 14. She studied the tactical display, noting the enemy's formation and speed. 12 ships against her 1, but the Veltar's Pride was a heavy cruiser with superior firepower and defenses. Still, the coordination in their approach suggested these weren't typical pirates looking for easy prey. "Analysis, Mr. Talk." "Vexstar, what do you make of their formation?" Her second-in-command studied the display, his crest flicking with uncertainty. "It's unusual, Commander. They're approaching in a pattern I don't recognize, but it seems designed to maximize their ability to overwhelm our point defenses." From his position at the Cultural Attaché Station, a largely ceremonial post during combat operations, Marcus spoke quietly. "Turi got you. It's a Terran formation, Wolfpack Pattern 7, adapted for space combat." Every head on the bridge turned toward him. Zarathique felt her heart skip a beat. "Explain!" Marcus hesitated for just a moment, and she saw that flicker in his eyes again, the same one she had noticed when she mentioned the Battle of New Geneva. "It's a formation developed by human naval forces for coordinated assault against a superior opponent. The lead ships draw defensive fire while the trailing vessels position themselves to exploit weaknesses in the target's coverage." "How do you know about Terran military formations?" Lieutenant Commander Vexstar demanded, his tone suspicious. "I'm human," Marcus replied simply. "And I read." But Zarathique was studying his face, noting the way his eyes tracked the approaching ships on the display, the unconscious way his hand had moved to rest near where a weapons console would be on a human ship. There was something he wasn't telling her, something important. "Recommendations?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. Marcus glanced at her, and for just a moment she saw something in his expression that reminded her of the hardened veterans who had trained her at the academy. Men and women who had seen too much death and learned to live with impossible choices. "If they're using Wolfpack 7, they'll try to force us into a rotating defensive pattern while their fastest ships flank us. The formation has one major weakness. If you can eliminate the coordination ship, usually positioned at the rear of the formation, the attack loses cohesion and becomes a standard swarm." "And how exactly would you identify which ship is coordinating the attack?" Marcus was quiet for several seconds, studying the display with an intensity that seemed at odds with his usual careful demeanor. "The coordination ship will maintain position relative to the others while they maneuver. It will also be broadcasting on a specific frequency to maintain formation integrity." Communications Officer Telvin looked up from her station. "Commander, I'm detecting high-frequency transmissions between the raider vessels. The source appears to be the vessel in the rear of their formation." Zarethic stared at Marcus, a dozen questions forming in her mind. But before she could voice any of them, the first wave of raiders opened fire, and the bridge erupted into the controlled chaos of combat. "Evasive maneuvers," she ordered. "Return fire, all batteries!" The Veltar's pride shuddered under the impact of enemy weapons, her shields flaring as they absorbed the punishment. On the main screen, the raiders moved with a coordination that spoke of extensive training and practice, their formation shifting and adapting as they sought to overwhelm her ship's defenses. "Shields at 80%, reported the tactical officer. "Enemy vessels are moving to flank our position." It was exactly as Marcus had predicted. Zarethic found herself glancing toward him again, noting how he watched the battle unfold with the calm attention of someone analyzing a familiar problem rather than witnessing combat for the first time. "Target their coordination vessel," she ordered. "All forward batteries, full spread." The cruiser's main guns spoke with devastating authority, sending streams of coherent energy toward the rear raider vessel. But the ship was already moving, dodging with an agility that suggested its pilot knew exactly what kind of response to expect. "Target is evasive," the tactical officer reported unnecessarily. "We're not getting a solid lock." The raiders pressed their attack, their formation beginning to envelope the cruiser despite her superior firepower. Warning indicators began flashing on multiple stations as damage reports came in from across the ship. "Commander," Marcus said quietly, "there's something else about Wolfpack 7 that I didn't mention." She looked at him, noting the way his hands had unconsciously formed fists, knuckles white with tension. "What?" "It was developed specifically to counter Veltar tactical doctrine. Your standard response patterns, your preferred firing solutions, everything your people typically do in this situation will play into their strategy." The words hit her like a physical blow. "You're saying they know how we fight?" "I'm saying this formation was designed to kill ships exactly like this one, crewed by people who think exactly like you do. Around them, the battle continued to deteriorate." Despite their superior firepower, the raiders were gradually gaining the upper hand through coordination and superior positioning. Zarethic could see her options narrowing with each passing minute. "What do you suggest?" she asked, the words feeling strange in her mouth. For 3 years, she had dismissed her husband's contributions as academic exercises. Now, she was asking him for tactical advice in the middle of a battle for their lives. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight she had never heard before. "There is a counter to Wolfpack 7, but implementing it would require us to do something that goes against everything your people consider honorable in combat." "Explain." "We'd have to run." The words fell into silence on the bridge. Every officer present was Veltar, raised from birth on stories of glorious last stands and heroic sacrifices. The idea of retreat in the face of mere pirates was almost incomprehensible. "Run?" Lieutenant Commander Vextar's voice was incredulous. "Commander, we're talking about 12 raider vessels. Our honor will be intact if we survive to fight another day," Marcus said firmly, his voice carrying an authority that seemed to surprise everyone present, including himself. "But honor won't matter much if we're dead." Zarethic studied her husband's face, seeing something there she had never noticed before. It wasn't the calm passivity she had grown accustomed to. It was the controlled intensity of someone who had learned hard lessons about the difference between bravery and stupidity. "You have a plan." It wasn't a question, and Marcus nodded once. "Wolfpack 7 assumes the target will fight in place, using superior firepower to break the formation. But if we run, and run in exactly the right way, we can turn their coordination against them." Another impact rocked the ship, and sparks flew from an overloaded console. They were running out of time. "Tell me," Zarethic said. Marcus stepped toward the tactical display, his movements suddenly crisp and purposeful in a way that made every officer on the bridge take notice. The quiet, deferential cultural attaché was gone, replaced by someone who moved with the unconscious authority of a born commander. A wolf pack formation depends on predictable enemy behavior, he began, his fingers dancing across the holographic controls with a familiarity that should have been impossible for someone with no combat experience. The raiders expect us to stand and fight, using our superior firepower to break their coordination. But their formation has a critical weakness that only becomes apparent when the target does something unexpected. Another salvo from the raiders struck their shields and warning lights flashed across multiple stations. The Veltar's pride shuddered under the impact, but Marcus didn't even glance at the damage reports scrolling across the tactical screens. If we retreat along this vector, he continued, tracing a path on the display, at exactly 73% maximum speed, maintaining this specific engine signature, the raiders will pursue in their current formation. Their coordination ship will adjust the pack's positioning to maintain optimal firing solutions. Lieutenant Commander Vexstar leaned forward, his crest flicking with confused irritation. I fail to see how running away solves our problem, human. Marcus turned to look at him, and Zarathik felt a chill run down her spine. There was something in her husband's eyes that she had never seen before, a coldness that spoke of calculations made in blood and measured in lives lost. Because, Marcus said quietly, Wolfpack 7 was designed to hunt Veltar cruisers, but it was never tested against a target that knew it was being hunted by Wolfpack 7. He manipulated the display again, showing the projected pursuit pattern. The formation's strength is its coordination, but that's also its vulnerability. The raiders will adjust their spacing and timing based on our apparent course and speed. But if we suddenly change those parameters at exactly the right moment, the tactical display shifted, showing the raider formation as it would appear after pursuing them for several minutes. Marcus highlighted specific vessels in the enemy group, his finger tracing their predicted positions. The coordination ship will be forced to broadcast correction signals to maintain formation integrity. In doing so, it will reveal its exact position and tactical priorities. More importantly, it will be focused on managing the pack rather than monitoring for threats to itself. Understanding began to dawn in Zarathik's mind. You want us to bait them into overextending their formation? More than that, Marcus replied, his voice carrying a note of grim satisfaction. Wolfpack 7 assumes the target doesn't know about the coordination ship's role, but if we suddenly reverse course and target that specific vessel with everything we have, while the rest of the pack is out of position to provide covering fire, their formation collapses, finished Communications Officer Telvin, her voice filled with admiration. Without coordination, they become 12 individual raiders attacking a heavy cruiser. Marcus nodded once. The psychological impact will be even more significant than the tactical advantage. These aren't regular pirates. They're using advanced human military formations and displaying coordination that suggests extensive training. When their battle plan falls apart, they'll likely break off the engagement rather than risk a conventional fight against a superior opponent. The bridge was silent except for the sounds of battle, weapons fire, damage alarms, the steady hum of overtaxed systems. Zarathik studied the tactical projection, her mind racing through the implications of what her husband was suggesting. This is remarkably detailed tactical knowledge for a cultural attaché, she said carefully. Marcus met her eyes, and for a moment she saw something that looked almost like regret. I told you, I'm not trying to be human, Zara. There are things about my past that I've chosen not to discuss. Another impact rocked the ship, this one strong enough to send several officers stumbling. The tactical officer looked up from his console, his face grim. Commander, shields are down to 62%. If we're going to do something, we need to do it now. Zarathik found herself at a crossroads that went far beyond military tactics. For 3 years, she had dismissed her husband as passive and weak, someone who preferred safe academic pursuits to the challenges of real command. Now he was offering her a battle plan that could save her ship and crew, but implementing it would mean acknowledging that everything she thought she knew about him was wrong. Helm, she said, her decision made, new course. Bearing 27 Mark IV, speed 73% maximum. Commander?" The helmsman's voice carried obvious confusion. "That course takes us directly away from the engagement. I'm aware of our heading, Ensign." "Execute the order." The Veltar's pride began to turn, her massive bulk responding to the helm's commands with surprising grace. On the main screen, the Raider formation shifted in response, their vessels moving to pursue just as Marcus had predicted. "They're taking the bait," reported the tactical officer. "All enemy vessels are moving to pursuit formation." Marcus stepped closer to Zaratik's command chair, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Zara, there's something you need to understand about what we're about to do. This isn't just tactics, it's psychology. We're going to break their formation and probably their will to fight. But if I'm wrong about their training or their leadership, if they decide to press the attack even after losing coordination, then we fight 12 individual raiders instead of one coordinated pack," she finished. "I understand the risks, do you?" Marcus's voice carried a weight that made her look at him sharply. "Because once we commit to this course of action, there's no going back. These raiders will know that someone on this ship understands human military doctrine well enough to counter it. That knowledge will spread, and eventually someone will start asking questions about who taught us those tactics." Zarathik felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Marcus, what exactly are you not telling me?" Before he could answer, the tactical officer called out, "Commander, the raiders are adjusting formation. They're moving into the exact pattern Mr. Chen predicted." On the display, the enemy vessels had spread out into a pursuit formation that would maximize their ability to bring weapons to bear while maintaining coordination. The trailing vessel, the coordination ship, was exactly where Marcus had said it would be, slightly behind and to the side of the main formation. "Time to intercept?" Zarathik asked. 4 minutes, 30 seconds at current course and speed," replied the helmsman. "Marcus," she said quietly, "I need to know what we're dealing with. Who are you really?" Her husband was silent for a long moment, watching the tactical display with eyes that seemed to see more than just the current engagement. When he spoke, his voice carried a note of something that might have been regret. "Do you remember the Battle of New Geneva, Zara? The engagement you mentioned earlier, where human forces held off the Zirian invasion? Of course. It's studied at military academies across the galaxy. A brilliant defensive action that turned a rout into a stalemate. The official records say that Admiral Sarah Chen commanded the human fleet during that battle. They don't mention that she had a younger brother who served as her tactical coordinator, someone who specialized in developing formations that could counter known enemy doctrines. The words hit Zarathik like a physical blow. She stared at her husband, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time in their 3 years of marriage. The careful way he moved, the unconscious authority in his bearing when discussing military matters, the depth of knowledge he had displayed about raider tactics, it all suddenly made terrible sense. "Chen," she whispered. "As in Admiral Sarah Chen. My sister died at New Geneva," Marcus said quietly, "along with 40% of the human fleet and most of my tactical staff. The formations we developed there, including Wolfpack 7, were classified and supposedly destroyed after the war ended. The fact that pirates are using them suggests someone with access to sealed military archives has been training them. The implications crashed over her in waves. Her quiet, passive husband wasn't just human, he was a war hero from one of the most significant battles in recent galactic history. More than that, he was apparently the architect of tactical doctrines that were still being used decades later." "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, though even as the words left her mouth, she thought she understood. Marcus glanced around the bridge, noting the way every officer was carefully not listening to their conversation while simultaneously hanging on every word. Because Lieutenant Commander Marcus Chen died at New Geneva along with his sister and most of his friends. "I wanted to be someone else, someone who didn't carry the weight of all those deaths. I thought I could be just Marcus, your husband, a man who cataloged cultural differences and wrote diplomatic reports." "But you can't escape what you are," Zarathik said, understanding flooding through her. "No," Marcus agreed, his voice heavy with something that might have been grief. Especially not when people are using my own tactics against innocent civilians. The tactical officer's voice cut through their conversation. Commander, 2 minutes to intercept. The coordination ship is maintaining position as predicted. Zarathik looked at the display, then at her husband, seeing him clearly for the first time. What do you need from us to make this work? Marcus straightened, and she saw the transformation happen in real time. The careful, deferential cultural attaché disappeared completely, replaced by someone who had commanded fleets and made decisions that affected the lives of millions. When we reverse course, we'll have approximately 18 seconds before the raiders can adjust their formation. During that window, we need to concentrate all fire on the coordination ship, while simultaneously jamming their communication frequencies to prevent them from issuing new orders to the pack. He turned to face the communications station. Telvin, I need you to prepare a broad-spectrum interference pattern focused on these specific frequencies. His fingers moved across her console with practiced efficiency, inputting a series of parameters that made the young officer's eyes widen. Mr. Chen, these are military encryption frequencies. How did you... Because I helped design them, Marcus said simply. And because whoever trained these raiders has access to information they should never have been able to acquire. He moved to the tactical station next, his hands dancing across controls with the fluid expertise of someone who had done this countless times before. We'll have one chance at this. The moment we begin our turn, target the coordination ship with all forward batteries. Full power to weapons, everything else on minimal. The tactical officer nodded, his earlier skepticism replaced by professional respect. Targeting solutions locked in, all batteries charged and ready. Marcus returned to stand beside Zaratik's chair, but his posture was completely different now. Gone was the careful deference she had grown accustomed to. In its place was the calm confidence of someone who had commanded in battles that decided the fate of civilizations. Zara, he said quietly, once we do this, there's no going back. These raiders will report what happened here, and eventually someone will connect Lieutenant Commander Marcus Chen to Marcus Chen, cultural attaché. Are you prepared for that? She looked at him, really looked at him, and wondered how she had ever thought this man was weak or passive. The signs had always been there, the way he moved with unconscious precision, the depth of knowledge he displayed about military affairs, the calm way he faced danger. She had mistaken restraint for weakness, careful consideration for indecision. The question isn't whether I'm prepared, she said. The question is whether the galaxy is prepared for Marcus Chen to stop hiding. Something shifted in her husband's expression, a hardness that reminded her of tempered steel. I hope not, because the galaxy has forgotten why humans earned their reputation as the most dangerous species in known space. These raiders are about to receive a reminder. Execute the maneuver, Zarathik commanded. The Veltar's pride spun on her axis with surprising grace for such a massive vessel, her engines flaring as she reversed course and accelerated directly toward the pursuing raiders. For a moment, the enemy formation held together, their coordination ship broadcasting frantically to adjust their position. Then Marcus's plan unfolded with devastating precision. The cruiser's main battery spoke as 1. Sending a concentrated barrage of energy directly at the coordination ship. At the same moment, Telvin activated the jamming frequencies Marcus had provided, flooding the raiders' communication channels with interference. The coordination ship, caught completely off guard and unable to warn its allies, disappeared in a brilliant flash of exploding plasma. Without their tactical coordinator and unable to communicate effectively, the remaining raiders found themselves scattered across space with no coherent battle plan. Direct hit on primary target, reported the tactical officer, his voice filled with professional admiration. Enemy coordination ship destroyed. Remaining vessels are breaking formation. Raider pack. On the main screen, the Raider pack disintegrated into chaos. Some vessels tried to continue the attack, others attempted to reform into a new pattern, and several began moving toward the edge of the system at high speed. They're running, breathed Lieutenant Commander Vexstar. 11 raiders, and they're running from us. Marcus watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. They're not running from us. They're running from the realization that someone just used their own tactics against them more effectively than they've ever used them themselves. The remaining raiders who had chosen to continue fighting quickly discovered the disadvantage of facing a heavy cruiser without coordination or tactical support. Within minutes, 3 more vessels had been destroyed and the rest were fleeing at maximum speed. "All enemy contacts have left the engagement zone," reported the sensor officer. "We are clear of immediate threats." The bridge erupted in cheers from the younger officers. But Zarathic noticed that the senior staff remained thoughtfully quiet. They understood the implications of what they had just witnessed and what it meant about the man who had made it possible. "Stand down from red alert," she commanded. "Damage control teams assess our status and report. Communications send a message to Fleet Command reporting the engagement and requesting immediate analysis of the raiders' tactical formations." As her crew carried out their orders with professional efficiency, Zarathic found herself studying her husband with new eyes. Marcus stood near the tactical station, reviewing the engagement data with the focused attention of someone analyzing their own handiwork. "Commander," Lieutenant Commander Vexstar said quietly, approaching her chair. "Permission to speak privately?" She nodded, and he leaned closer, his voice low. "Ma'am, with respect, your husband just demonstrated tactical knowledge that goes far beyond what any cultural attaché should possess. If even half of what I suspect is true, then we have a war hero serving aboard our vessel under an assumed identity," Zarathic finished. "What would you suggest we do about that, Mr. Shaft?" "Vexstar." Her second-in-command was quiet for a moment, glancing toward Marcus before meeting her eyes. "I think, Commander, that we should be very grateful he's on our side." Zarathic nodded slowly. "Agreed. But this engagement raises questions that will need answers. Someone trained those raiders in classified human military tactics. Someone with access to information that should have died with the officers who developed it. You think there's a larger conspiracy at work?" "I think," she said, watching as Marcus continued his analysis of the battle data, "that my husband's past is about to catch up with him whether he wants it to or not. And when it does, the galaxy is going to remember why humans are the most dangerous species in known space." 3 days after the engagement with the raiders, Marcus Chen stood in the ship's historical archive, surrounded by holographic displays showing the aftermath of the Battle of New Geneva. He had come here seeking solitude, but found himself confronting memories he had spent years trying to forget. The soft blue glow of the displays cast shadows across his face, highlighting the lines that 3 years of careful peace hadn't entirely erased. The archive was supposed to be restricted to senior officers only, but Marcus had long ago learned how to access systems that others considered secure. It was a skill that came in handy for a cultural attaché who needed to understand the historical context of diplomatic relationships. It was also a skill that Lieutenant Commander Marcus Chen had developed out of necessity during a war that had claimed most of his generation. "I wondered when you would come here," Zarathic said from behind him. Marcus didn't turn around, but his shoulders tensed slightly. He had been expecting this conversation since the moment he had stepped out of character on the bridge 3 days ago. "The official records are sanitized," he said quietly. "They make it sound like a glorious victory instead of the desperate last stand it actually was." Zarathic moved to stand beside him, studying the tactical displays that showed the final positions of human and Xerian fleets after the battle. 47 human vessels destroyed, over 30,000 casualties. But the Xerian advance was stopped, and they never recovered enough strength to mount another major offensive. 33,412, Marcus corrected, his voice flat. "I remember every name on the casualty lists, including my sister's." The display shifted, showing personnel records from the human fleet. Admiral Sarah Chen's image appeared, along with her service record and the posthumous decorations awarded after the battle. Beside her appeared a younger man in a lieutenant commander's uniform, his face bearing a striking resemblance to the quiet cultural attaché standing in the archive. "Lieutenant Commander Marcus Chen," Zarathic read from the display. "Chief Tactical Officer." Human Fleet Command. Credited with developing the defensive formations that made the stand at New Geneva possible, declared missing in action when his command ship was destroyed in the final assault. "Not missing," Marcus said. "I was picked up by a search and rescue team 3 days after the battle ended. They found me in an escape pod with 14 other survivors, half of whom died from radiation poisoning, before we reached medical facilities." He gestured toward the tactical displays, showing the complex formations that had allowed the human fleet to hold off a superior Xerion force. "I spent 2 years developing those tactics, running simulations and war games that consumed every waking hour. I was so focused on finding ways to make smaller forces more effective against larger ones that I barely noticed when the war started consuming everyone I cared about." Zarythix studied his profile, noting the tension in his jaw and the way his hands had unconsciously formed fists. "What happened after you were rescued?" "They wanted me to continue working on tactical development for the next phase of the war. I was supposed to analyze Xerion formations and develop new counters, train new officers in the doctrines that had worked at New Geneva." Marcus's voice carried a bitterness she had never heard before. "But I couldn't do it anymore. Every time I looked at a tactical display, all I saw were the ships that hadn't made it home, the crews that had followed my orders into battles they couldn't win." He turned to face her, and she saw pain in his eyes that went deeper than simple grief. "Do you know what it's like to be responsible for the deaths of thousands of people? To know that every tactical decision you make will determine who lives and who dies?" "Command always carries that burden," Zarythix said carefully. "Not like this." Marcus shook his head. "Veltar Command Doctrine emphasizes honor and courage in battle. Your people fight bravely and accept that death is a possibility. But human tactics, my tactics, were different. They were based on the assumption that human lives were expendable, as long as the strategic objective was achieved. I sent ships into impossible situations because I knew the crews would follow orders even when those orders were essentially death sentences." The archives displays shifted again, showing the detailed casualty reports from New Geneva. Marcus gestured toward them with something approaching disgust. "The Corvin raiders you fought 3 days ago were using Wolfpack 7, a formation I designed specifically to destroy ships like yours. But they were using it incorrectly, which is why we were able to counter it so effectively." Understanding began to dawn in Zarythix's mind. "You recognized the formation because you created it. I created dozens of formations during the war, each one designed to give human forces an advantage against superior numbers or firepower. Wolfpack 7 was meant to counter Veltar defensive tactics, because there was always the possibility that political situations might force humans to fight former allies." Marcus's voice carried a note of self-recrimination. "I planned for every contingency, including the one where your people might become our enemies." The implication sent a chill down Zarythix's spine. "But the war ended over a decade ago. How did pirates acquire access to classified military formations? That's what I've been trying to figure out for the past 3 days." Marcus moved to another display, calling up communication intercepts from the recent engagement. The raiders were using encrypted frequencies that were supposed to be destroyed after the war ended. More than that, they were implementing the formation with modifications that suggest someone with deep knowledge of human tactical doctrine has been training them. He highlighted specific portions of the intercepted communications, showing coordination patterns that spoke of extensive practice and drilling. This isn't just someone who found old tactical manuals. Someone who understands the theoretical foundations behind these formations has been teaching others how to use them effectively. Zarythix studied the data, her command training allowing her to appreciate the sophisticated level of coordination the raiders had displayed. How many people would have had access to this level of detailed tactical knowledge? After New Geneva, maybe 24 officers across all of human space. Most of them died in the war's final campaigns. Marcus paused, something cold creeping into his expression. But a few survived, and some of them might have decided that classified tactical doctrines were too valuable to remain buried in military archives. You think someone is selling human military secrets to criminals? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring at the communication intercepts with the focused intensity of someone analyzing a complex puzzle. I think someone is doing worse than that. The modifications to Wolfpack 7 that these raiders were using, they're improvements. Someone didn't just teach them the formation, they enhanced it based on practical experience against modern vessels and defensive systems. The archive fell silent, except for the soft hum of the ship's environmental systems. Zarathic found herself struggling to process the implications of what her husband was suggesting. If someone was actively developing and distributing advanced military tactics to criminal organizations, it represented a threat to galactic security that went far beyond simple piracy. Marcus, she said carefully, if you're right about this, it means there's a systematic effort to arm criminal organizations with military-grade tactical knowledge. That's not just theft of classified information. It's an act of war against the Confederation itself. I know. Marcus turned away from the displays, his expression grim. And there's something else. The frequency modulations the raiders were using, they're based on encryption algorithms that I personally developed during the war. There are maybe 5 people in the galaxy who would know how to implement them correctly. Are you saying you know who might be responsible? Marcus hesitated, and she could see him weighing his words carefully. There's someone I need to contact. Someone who might be able to provide answers about how this tactical knowledge is being distributed. Who? Colonel James Harrison. We was my second in command during the tactical development program. If anyone would know about unauthorized access to classified formations, it would be him. Zarathic felt a mixture of apprehension and excitement. For 3 years she had lived with a man she thought she understood completely. Now she was discovering depths to his character and experience that fundamentally changed everything she knew about him. Contact him, she said. But Marcus, I need you to understand that this changes everything between us. I can't pretend you're just a cultural attaché anymore. If these raiders are using your tactics against Confederation vessels, then you have a responsibility to help stop them. Marcus nodded slowly. I know. But Zara, you need to understand what you're asking. If I start actively working on tactical problems again, I'm not sure I can control where that path leads. The person who created Wolfpack 7 isn't someone I want to be again. Then maybe it's time you became someone new, she said. Someone who uses that knowledge to protect people instead of finding new ways to kill them. Marcus looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something shift in his expression. The careful passivity she had grown accustomed to was gone, replaced by the focused determination of someone who had made a difficult decision. All right, he said, but if we're going to do this, we need to be prepared for the consequences. Once I start digging into how these tactics are being distributed, we're going to attract attention from people who won't appreciate our interference. What kind of attention? Marcus gestured toward the tactical displays, showing the complex formations and encrypted communications that spoke of sophisticated military training. The kind of people who have access to classified tactical doctrines and the resources to train criminal organizations in their use aren't going to be simple criminals. We're talking about former military officers, intelligence operatives, maybe even active duty personnel who've decided that the Confederation's policies don't serve their interests. The archive's lights dimmed slightly as the ship's night cycle began, casting deeper shadows across the historical displays. Zarathic found herself thinking about her crew, her ship, and the responsibilities of command that had defined her entire adult life. Marcus, if these people are as dangerous as you suggest, then we can't handle this alone. We need to involve Fleet Command, maybe even Confederation intelligence. No, the flat certainty in Marcus's voice surprised her. Not yet. If there are active duty personnel involved in this, then bringing in official channels could compromise any investigation before it begins. We need to understand the scope of the problem before we decide who to trust with the information. Marcus moved to the archive's communication console, his fingers dancing across the controls with practiced efficiency. I'm going to contact Harrison using a secure channel that bypasses normal fleet communications. If anyone is monitoring official frequencies for signs that I've become active again, this should stay below their notice. As he worked, Zaratik found herself watching him with new eyes. The transformation that had begun during the engagement with the Raiders was continuing, revealing layers of competence and experience that recontextualized everything she thought she knew about her husband. "There," Marcus said, stepping back from the console. "The message is sent using an encryption protocol that Harrison and I developed during the war. If he's still alive and using his old contact procedures, he should respond within 24 hours. And if he doesn't respond?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, his expression troubled. "Then we'll know that either he's dead or he's one of the people we're looking for." The communication console chimed softly, indicating that the message had been transmitted successfully. Marcus stared at the confirmation display with an expression that mixed hope and apprehension in equal measure. "Zara," he said quietly, "I need you to know that once we start down this path, there's no guarantee where it will lead us. The people involved in this conspiracy have access to advanced tactical knowledge and significant resources. If they decide we represent a threat, then we'll deal with that when it happens," she interrupted. "Right now, my concern is stopping them from using your tactics against innocent civilians." Marcus nodded, but his expression remained troubled. "There's something else you should know. The tactical doctrines I developed during the war, they weren't just defensive formations. Some of them were designed for offensive operations against superior forces. If criminals have access to those, they could threaten major shipping lanes or even attack Confederation installations directly," Zaratik finished, the implication sending a chill down her spine. "More than that, some of the formations I developed could be used to coordinate attacks against planetary defense systems. In the wrong hands, they could enable small criminal organizations to threaten entire worlds." The archive fell silent as they contemplated the scope of the threat they were potentially facing. Zaratik found herself thinking about the calm certainty Marcus had displayed during the engagement with the Raiders, the way he had analyzed their tactics and developed a counter-strategy with frightening efficiency. "Marcus," she said carefully, "when you were developing these tactics during the war, did you ever consider what would happen if they fell into the wrong hands?" Her husband was quiet for a long moment, staring at the tactical displays with an expression that might have been regret. "Every tactical officer considers that possibility. But during wartime, the immediate threat takes precedence over theoretical future risks. We needed ways to win battles against superior forces, and we needed them quickly. And now those methods are being used against the people you were trying to protect." Yes, the single word carried a weight of responsibility that made Zaratik understand, for the first time, why Marcus had chosen to hide from his past. "Which is why I need to find out who's distributing this knowledge and stop them before they can do any more damage." The communication console chimed again, this time with an incoming message alert. Marcus moved to the controls, his fingers flying across the interface as he decoded the transmission. "It's from Harrison," he said, his voice tight with tension. "But the message isn't what I was expecting. What does it say?" Marcus studied the decoded text for several seconds before responding, his expression growing increasingly grim. "It says the wolf pack has found new prey. If you're really Marcus Chen, meet me at the coordinates I'm transmitting. Come alone, and come ready for a fight." Zaratik felt her blood chill. "That sounds like a trap." "Maybe," Marcus agreed. "Or maybe Harrison has been tracking the same conspiracy we're investigating and he knows something about who's behind it. Either way, you're not going alone." Marcus looked at her and she saw something in his expression that reminded her of the moment he had taken control during the engagement with the Raiders. "Zara, if this is a trap, then bringing a Confederation vessel into whatever Harrison has planned would be disastrous. And if it's not a trap, then he has information that could be vital to stopping this conspiracy. Then we go together, but not in an official capacity. Steady. We take a shuttle, minimal crew, and approach as civilians. Marcus shook his head. These people know my tactics. Remember? If they've turned Harrison, then they'll be prepared for any approach I might take. The only advantage we have is that they don't know you're involved, which is exactly why I'm not letting you go alone, Saratik said firmly. You said yourself that this conspiracy involves people with significant resources and advanced tactical knowledge. You're going to need backup. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, weighing options with the careful consideration she had once mistaken for indecision. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions. All right, but we do this my way, using protocols that Harrison and I developed for high-risk operations during the war. And Zara, once we commit to this course of action, we'll be placing ourselves and potentially this entire ship in danger. Are you prepared for that? Looking at her husband, really seeing him for perhaps the first time in their marriage, Zarathok made her decision. Marcus Chen, whoever you were before and whoever you're becoming, you're still my husband, and I'm not letting you face this alone. The shuttle Seeker's Edge dropped out of hyperspace at the coordinates Harrison had provided, emerging into normal space near a desolate asteroid field on the outer rim of the Kythera system. Marcus sat in the pilot's chair with the stillness that Zarathik had learned to recognize as his preparation for violence, his dark eyes scanning the sensor displays with the focused attention of a predator evaluating potential threats. No immediate contacts on sensors, reported Ensign Torak from the communication station. The young Veltar officer had volunteered for the mission when Marcus had requested minimal crew, though Zarathik suspected he had no idea what he was signing up for. That doesn't mean we're alone, Marcus said quietly, his fingers dancing across the shuttle's tactical controls with practiced efficiency. Harrison always preferred ambush tactics. If he's here, he'll be hidden among the asteroids, where passive sensors can't detect him. Zaratik studied her husband's profile, noting the way his entire demeanor had shifted since they left the Veltar's Pride. The careful cultural attaché was completely gone, replaced by someone who moved and spoke with the unconscious authority of a born warrior. It was like watching a master craftsman return to work after years of forced retirement. Broadcasting on the frequency Harrison specified. Ensign Torak reported. No response yet. Marcus adjusted their approach vector, steering the shuttle deeper into the asteroid field, with a skill that spoke of extensive experience navigating dangerous environments. He'll respond when he's ready. Harrison doesn't like to commit to anything until he's certain of all the variables. The shuttle's proximity alarms chimed softly as they passed between two massive asteroids, their surfaces scarred by eons of cosmic bombardment. Marcus guided them through the maze of floating rock with casual expertise, reading the gravitational fields and debris patterns like a familiar text. Marcus, Zarathik said quietly, what was Harrison like during the war? Her husband considered the question for several moments before responding. Brilliant, paranoid, absolutely ruthless when the situation required it. He saved my life at least 6 times that I can remember, and probably more that I don't. If anyone could survive the aftermath of New Geneva and build a new life in hiding, it would be James Harrison. And if anyone could be convinced to sell military secrets for the right price, Marcus's hands tightened almost imperceptibly on the shuttle's controls. That's what we're here to find out, the communication console chirped with an incoming transmission. Ensign Torak looked up from his station, his crest flicking with uncertainty. Sir, I'm receiving a coded transmission on a non-standard frequency. The encryption pattern doesn't match any Confederation protocols. Patch it through, Marcus said, his voice carrying a note of grim anticipation. The main display flickered, then resolved into the image of a man in his 50s with graying hair and eyes that held the same haunted intensity that Zarathik had learned to recognize in veteran soldiers. Colonel James Harrison looked older than she had expected, but there was nothing weak about his bearing or the way he studied their shuttle through the transmission link. Marcus Chen, Harrison said, his voice carrying a mixture of relief and apprehension. I wondered if you were really dead or just smart enough to stay hidden. A little of both, Marcus replied. Hello, James. It's been a long time. Not long enough, considering why you're here. Harrison's expression hardened. You encountered Wolfpack 7, didn't you? That's why you're breaking cover after all these years. Pirates attacked my wife's ship using formations that should have been classified beyond their reach. I need to know how they acquired that knowledge. Harrison was quiet for a moment, his eyes shifting to study Zarothic through the transmission. Commander Zarothic of the Veltar Imperial Navy. I've read about your service record. Impressive tactical mind, though I suspect you've learned more about your husband in the past week than in your previous 3 years of marriage. Among other things, Zarothic replied carefully. Colonel Harrison, my primary concern is preventing these tactics from being used against civilian targets. If you have information about how they're being distributed— Oh, I have information, Harrison interrupted, his voice taking on a bitter edge. More than you want to know. But this conversation isn't happening over an open channel, and it's certainly not happening with Confederation personnel listening in. Marcus frowned. James, Ensign Torak is cleared for this, Marcus. No one except the people who were there when we developed these tactics and the people who've been systematically hunting down anyone with knowledge of them. Harrison's image leaned closer to the transmission pickup. Dock with my ship. Coordinates are being transmitted now. And Marcus, come armed. The transmission ended, leaving them staring at a tactical display that showed the location of Harrison's vessel hidden deep within the asteroid field. Marcus studied the coordinates with an expression that mixed professional admiration with growing concern. He's positioned himself perfectly, Marcus said. Multiple escape routes, clear fields of fire in all directions, and enough sensor shadows to hide a small fleet. This is either very good preparation or a very sophisticated trap. Or both, Zarthok observed. Marcus, I don't like the way he dismissed Ensign Torak. If he's genuinely concerned about security, that's understandable. But if he's working with the people distributing these tactics, then we're flying into an ambush, designed by one of the most paranoid tactical minds in human space, Marcus finished. I know, but we need the information he has, and this may be our only chance to get it. Marcus began plotting a course toward Harrison's coordinates, his movements precise and economical. Zarothic found herself studying his hands as he worked, noting the unconscious competence with which he manipulated the shuttle's systems. Everything about the way he moved spoke of extensive training and experience that went far beyond what any cultural attaché would possess. Ensign Torak, she said, I want you to monitor all frequencies and maintain a communication lock with the Veltar's Pride. If anything goes wrong, with respect, Commander, the young officer interrupted, I think I should accompany you to the meeting. If Colonel Harrison is potentially hostile, then having a third party present would only complicate the situation, Marcus said firmly. Harrison knows me and he's agreed to meet with Commander Zarothic. Adding another unknown variable to the equation could destabilize a situation that's already extremely volatile. Ensign Torak's crest flicked with disappointment, but he nodded acknowledgement. Understood, sir. I'll maintain station here and monitor for any changes in the tactical situation. The shuttle moved deeper into the asteroid field, navigating through increasingly complex formations of floating rock and debris. Marcus piloted with the casual expertise of someone who had spent years in similar environments, reading gravitational patterns and debris flows like a familiar language. There, he said, highlighting a contact on the sensor display. Harrison's ship. Modified courier vessel probably armed well beyond its apparent capacity. He always preferred to look less dangerous than he actually was. The vessel that appeared on their screens was unremarkable at first glance, a standard civilian courier design that might have belonged to any independent trader. But as they drew closer, Zarothic began to notice details that spoke of extensive modifications. The hull showed signs of armor plating. The engine configuration suggested significant power upgrades. and there were hardpoints for weapon systems that definitely hadn't come with the original design. "This is more than a simple modification job," she observed. "Someone invested serious resources in upgrading this vessel." "Harrison always believed in being prepared for the worst possible scenario," Marcus replied. "During the war, he once told me that paranoia was just good planning taken to its logical conclusion." The docking procedure went smoothly, with Harrison's ship extending an airlock tube that sealed against their shuttle's hull with mechanical precision. But as they prepared to disembark, Marcus hesitated, his hand resting on the weapon at his side. "Zara," he said quietly, "once we go aboard Harrison's ship, we're committed to seeing this through to the end. If he's working with the people who are distributing these tactics, then we're walking into a trap. And if he's not, then what he tells us could change everything we think we know about this conspiracy. Either way, we need the information he has," Zarathic replied. "And Marcus, whatever happens over there, I want you to know that I understand now why you kept your past hidden. But I also understand why you can't keep hiding from it." Marcus nodded, something shifting in his expression that reminded her of the moment he had taken control during the engagement with the Raiders. "Then, let's go find out what James Harrison knows about who's been using my tactics to kill innocent people." The airlock cycled through its sequence with mechanical efficiency, and they found themselves aboard Harrison's ship. The interior was Spartanly functional, with every surface showing the kind of wear that came from years of hard use. But there were also details that spoke of careful maintenance and significant investment: high-end sensor equipment, military-grade communication systems, and weapon racks that held devices Zaratic didn't recognize. Harrison met them in what might have been a cargo hold but had been converted into something resembling a tactical command center. Multiple displays showed the surrounding asteroid field from different angles, while communication equipment monitored dozens of frequencies simultaneously. It was the kind of setup that belonged on a military vessel, not a civilian courier, Marcus Harrison said, extending his hand in the traditional human greeting. "You look good for a dead man. Marriage seems to agree with you." "James." Marcus clasped his former colleague's hand, and Zarathic noticed the way both men evaluated each other with the unconscious assessment of trained fighters. "Though I suspect that's about to change. Probably." Harrison turned to Zaratic, inclining his head in a gesture that managed to be both respectful and wary. "Commander, I've followed your career with interest. Your victory against the Hegemony fleet at Proxima was particularly impressive." "Thank you, Colonel. Though I suspect we're not here to discuss my service record." Harrison's expression hardened. "No, we're not. We're here to discuss the fact that someone has been systematically hunting down every officer who had access to the tactical doctrines Marcus developed during the war, and killing them." The words hit the room like a physical blow. Marcus went very still, and Zarathic felt something cold settle in her stomach. "What do you mean, killing them?" Marcus asked, his voice carefully controlled. Harrison moved to one of his displays, calling up a series of personnel files. "Captain Sarah Voss, found dead in her apartment on Centauri Prime 6 months ago. Apparent suicide, but the investigating officers noted several inconsistencies. Commander David Parkid, killed in a transport accident on Rigel Station. The transport's navigation system malfunctioned and flew directly into an asteroid field. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos died in a climbing accident on New Terra. Her safety equipment failed at exactly the wrong moment." As Harrison spoke, more files appeared on the display, each one showing a different officer who had worked on tactical development during the war. The list was disturbingly long, and a pattern was beginning to emerge. "How many?" Zarathic asked. 17 confirmed deaths in the past 2 years, Harrison replied. "All of them ruled accidental, or suicide by local authorities. All of them people who had intimate knowledge of the formations Marcus created." Marcus stared at the display, his face pale. "James, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that someone is eliminating everyone who might be able to identify the source of leaked tactical information. And I'm saying that if you hadn't been hiding under a false identity for the past decade, you'd probably be dead already. The tactical command center fell silent except for the soft hum of electronic equipment. Zarathik found herself thinking about the implications of what Harrison was suggesting. A systematic campaign of murder designed to cover up the theft and distribution of classified military information. Who's behind it? She asked. Harrison's expression grew even more grim. That's the question, isn't it? Someone with resources, someone with access to detailed information about classified programs, and someone with the ability to arrange accidents across multiple star systems without attracting official attention. You think it's someone within the Confederation government? Marcus said. It wasn't a question. I think it's someone with access to intelligence databases and the ability to coordinate operations across multiple jurisdictions. That narrows the field considerably. Marcus moved to study the personnel files more closely, his tactical mind automatically analyzing patterns and connections. James, have you been investigating this on your own? For the past 18 months. Ever since Sarah Voss turned up dead and I started noticing the pattern. Harrison's voice carried a note of bitter satisfaction. I've been very careful to stay off the official radar while gathering information. It's kept me alive so far. And what have you learned? Harrison activated another display, showing communication intercepts and financial records that spoke of sophisticated intelligence work. The people behind this aren't just selling tactical information to criminals. They're using it as part of a larger operation designed to destabilize Confederation military capabilities. Explain, Zarathik said. Think about it, Harrison replied. If criminal organizations start using advanced military tactics against civilian targets, what's the Confederation's response going to be? Increased security, expanded military patrols, higher defense budgets. And if those same criminals target shipping routes and commercial interests? Understanding dawned in Marcus's eyes. Economic disruption, political instability, public pressure for more aggressive military policies. Exactly. Someone is using our own tactical doctrines to create the conditions for a military coup or a major shift in Confederation policy, and they're eliminating anyone who might be able to trace the source of those doctrines back to them. The implications were staggering. Zarathik found herself thinking about the recent increase in pirate activity, the growing public concern about security in outlying systems, and the political pressure for expanded military authority that had been building throughout the Confederation. Who benefits from this kind of instability? She asked. Harrison and Marcus exchanged a look that spoke of shared understanding built through years of working together in dangerous situations. Military contractors, Marcus said. Intelligence agencies looking to expand their authority. Political factions that want to see more aggressive policies toward non-aligned systems. Or, Harrison added grimly, someone who wants to see the Confederation collapse entirely so they can build something new from the ruins. The Tactical Command Center fell silent as they contemplated the scope of the conspiracy they were facing. Zarathik found herself thinking about her ship, her crew, and the responsibilities of command that had defined her entire adult life. Colonel Harrison, she said finally, what do you need from us to stop this? Harrison's expression grew calculating. That depends on how far you're willing to go to get answers, because the next step in this investigation is going to require us to take some very significant risks. Marcus looked at his wife, seeing something in her expression that reminded him of the moment she had decided to trust his tactical judgment during the engagement with the raiders. What kind of risks? The kind that involve infiltrating a criminal organization that's been trained in your own tactical doctrines and finding out who's been providing them with classified information, Harrison replied. The kind that could get us all killed if we make even a single mistake. Zarathik studied the displays showing the pattern of murders and the evidence of systematic conspiracy. Then she looked at her husband, seeing clearly for perhaps the first time the man she had married. Then we better make sure we don't make any mistakes, she said. The criminal stronghold on Kessler Station existed in the gray zone between Confederation space and the lawless sectors beyond, a place where fortunes were made through violence and questions about the past were discouraged with lethal finality. Marcus Chen stood in the shadows of the station's main docking bay, watching ships arrive and depart with the casual attention of someone who belonged in such places. But beneath his carefully crafted facade of a freelance tactical consultant, every instinct honed by years of warfare was analyzing potential threats and escape routes. 2 weeks had passed since the meeting with Harrison, 2 weeks of careful preparation and identity construction that had transformed Commander Zara Thick of the Veltar Imperial Navy into Zara Keth, a disgraced former officer looking to sell her services to the highest bidder. The transformation had been remarkably convincing, though Marcus suspected that had more to do with his wife's natural tactical instincts than any training in deception. The Crimson Syndicate maintains their primary operations center in the station's lower levels, Harrison's voice whispered through the microcommunicator embedded in Marcus's ear. Security is tight, but they've been actively recruiting former military personnel with tactical experience. Your reputation as a weapons specialist should get you through the initial screening. Marcus touched his throat twice in acknowledgement, a signal that would be invisible to casual observation but would confirm to Harrison that the message had been received. The plan they had developed was elegant in its simplicity. Infiltrate the criminal organization that had been using his tactical doctrines, identify their source of classified information, and gather evidence that could be presented to Confederation authorities without revealing Marcus's true identity. Of course, elegant plans had a tendency to become complicated when they encountered reality. "Contact approaching from your 6 o'clock," Harrison warned. 2 individuals, armed, moving with purpose. This could be your introduction to the Syndicate. Marcus adjusted his position slightly, placing himself where he could observe the approaching figures while maintaining the appearance of casual disinterest. The 2 men who walked toward him carried themselves with the disciplined bearing of former military, their movements economical and purposeful in a way that civilian criminals rarely achieved. "Marcus Chen?" The taller of the 2 men spoke with a slight accent that Marcus recognized as originating from one of the outer colony worlds. "I understand you're looking for employment that makes use of your specialized skills. Depends on the work and the compensation," Marcus replied, letting just enough weariness creep into his voice to suggest someone who had been between jobs for longer than he was comfortable with. "I've heard the Crimson Syndicate pays well for the right kind of expertise." "We do. But we're also very particular about who we work with." The man studied Marcus with the calculating attention of someone evaluating a potential threat. "Walk with us. There are people who want to meet you." As they moved through the station's corridors, Marcus found himself analyzing the level of security and organization that the Syndicate maintained. The guards were positioned with military precision. Their equipment was uniformly high quality, and their communications protocols showed signs of advanced tactical training. This wasn't a typical criminal organization. It was something approaching a private army. The lift descended far below the station's commercial levels, emerging into a section that had clearly been extensively modified from its original design. Corridors had been widened to accommodate heavy equipment. Doorways had been reinforced against potential assault, and sensor clusters monitored every approach vector with the thoroughness of a military installation. "Impressive setup," Marcus observed. "Someone's invested serious resources in this operation." "The Syndicate takes security very seriously," the second man replied. "We've learned that in our business, paranoia is just good planning taken to its logical conclusion." The phrase sent a chill down Marcus's spine. Those were Harrison's exact words from their conversation 3 days ago, words that spoke of shared experience and common training. Either this was an incredible coincidence, married to a silent human. She never expected him to unsheathe his blade. HFY Stories, Best HFY Adventures.